I didn't mean to hurt him.
Dylan Shoemaker walked into a state Supreme courtroom pleading his case.
Our children, when there's a tragic accident or when there's a death involved.
25, then go to state prison.
Kids are not the first thought that comes to mind at the mention of a crime offender, but it will shock you to know that some of the kids are in the crime record books, and this video might change your perception of crime. From gruesome acts of sexual abuse to spine-chilling cases of unprovoked murder, these kids serving life sentences have proven to be menaces to society. Join us as we examine some of the most feared kids in prison. Number 15. Eddie Devine and Remy Harvey. In March 2014, Eddie Devine, a 17-year-old, was arrested for charges of armed carjacking, armed robbery, kidnapping, and sexual battery in Jackson. Devine and Remy Harvey, 13 years old at the time, were accused of forcing a woman into her car outside a Jackson apartment complex and driving around. At the same time, one of the teens raped and assaulted her with an ice pick. The woman escaped her captors when they dropped by a gas station to refuel. While free on bond from the Jackson charges, surprisingly, Devine was arrested by Flowood police on December 27, 2014, in connection with a carjacking outside a home supplies store. Devine was found armed with a knife, threatening to kill the woman before stealing her SUV. He was finally sentenced in Hinds County to 30 years for armed carjacking, 30 years for sexual battery, 30 years for armed robbery, with 15 suspended, and 30 years for kidnapping. We hope that time allows him to reflect on his choices and changes him. Number 14. Gregory Brooks and Jont Thompson. Gregory Brooks Jr. and Jont Thompson committed a gruesome crime against an elderly couple in northwest Indiana in 2009. The guys tricked the McClendon's place by faking car trouble. Armed with weapons, they pushed in, aiming to rob the house. They were disappointed at the couple for having only $50. Then they made the couple crawl upstairs to a bedroom. They hit the man with a vase, kicked him, and grabbed some jewelry. After that, they forced the couple into a downstairs bathroom, tied them up, and gagged them. They messed up the house, then went back to the bathrooms and did something terrible. They killed the couple. Milton got shot in the head, and Ruby got shot multiple times. They were found in a Calumet City Forest preserve with no ID. Brooks Jr. received a 120-year sentence for his involvement, while Thompson, only 17 at the time, also faced charges. The motive for the murders was sheer greed, shedding light on the disturbing lengths some would go to for financial reasons. Number 13. Heather Opel. Heather Opel, a 14-year-old girl, was sentenced to 22 years in prison without parole for her role in the murder of her mother's partner, Jerry Hyman. Her mother, Barbara Opel, along with 5 other teenagers, including her 13-year-old daughter, conspired in a plot to steal $40,000 and planned to kill Hyman, the owner, to get his money. The brutal attack involved baseball bats, souvenir bats, and a kitchen knife, leading to a horrifying outcome. This chilling crime was driven by greed and desperation, leading to a 22-year prison sentence. She expressed remorse for her actions during a court hearing for her transfer to an adult facility. She delivered an apology to the victim's family. The judge considered both the gravity of the crime and Opel's challenging upbringing in determining the sentence. The tragic plot leading to the murder was organized by Opel's mother, Barbara Opel, who now faces an impending trial on aggravated murder charges with the potential death penalty. Opel's defense shed light on a history of complaints regarding Barbara Opel's treatment of her children, bringing attention to allegations that the state failed to intervene despite reported abuse during their early years. Described as a 13-year-old who never had a chance, Heather Opel received her sentence, prompting her attorneys to appeal the decision to try her as an adult. If the appeal proves successful, she could be in juvenile detention until age 21. Number 12. Isaac Sims. On April 28, 2018, a tragic incident unfolded as 21-year-old Isaac Sims shot and killed his friend Luis Carlos Flores. Nearly 5 years after the grim event, Sims entered a guilty plea for murder and received a 35-year sentence. The investigation revealed that on the fateful night, Sims and Flores, who were friends and both resided in Galena Park, met to sell firearms. However, the situation took a dark turn. While seated in a car preparing to meet the buyer, Sims unexpectedly shot Flores in the chest and head. After committing the crime, Sims placed Flores's lifeless body in the back seat and pushed the car into a bayou along a street. Sims' DNA was on Flores's back pocket, and the gear shift after the car was retrieved from the marsh. Harris County District Attorney Kim Ogg emphasized that Flores was not only a friend of Sims's family, but was also a victim of an unnecessary and unjustifiable shooting. After 5 years, Isaac Sims chose to plead guilty to the charge of murder. Consequently, he was handed a 35-year prison sentence. Importantly, Sims cannot appeal either the conviction or the imposed sentence, and he must serve at least half of the term before becoming eligible for parole. Number 11. Lionel Tate. Lionel. Alexander Tate, the youngest American ever sentenced to life without parole, was convicted for the brutal murder of 6-year-old Tiffany in January 2001 in Florida. Tate was just 14 then and claimed it was an accident, but the injuries suggested otherwise. Tate was entrusted with the care of Eunuch, who was under the supervision of Tate's mother, Kathleen Grosset Tate, while she rested upstairs. Tate's defense contended that the 12-year-old, a 166-pound boy, was playing with the 6-year-old, a 46-pound girl, and unintentionally caused her death while demonstrating professional wrestling moves he claimed to have seen on television. The tragic incident resulted in Tate being convicted of killing Eunuch by forcefully stomping on her, causing a laceration to her liver. She also suffered a fractured skull, rib, and a swollen brain. The prosecution likened these injuries to those one might sustain from falling off a 3-story building. The sentencing of Tate was controversial as he was merely 12 years old at the time, and his victim was only 6. This case marked him as the youngest child in modern history to receive a life imprisonment sentence in the United States, prompting widespread criticism of the treatment of juvenile offenders within the state of Florida justice system. The severity of the punishment raised questions and discussions about the appropriateness of such sentences for individuals of such a young age. Number 10. Brenda Spencer. This kid personified the metaphorical Grim Reaper for students and staff of Grover Cleveland Elementary School when she deliberately opened fire on the school on a Monday. Aged 16 at the time, Brenda Spencer fired shots at San Diego's Grover Cleveland Elementary School, using a .22 caliber rifle from her family's house across the street. The shooting resulted in the death of Principal Burton Ragg and custodian Mike Suchar, with 8 students and a police officer sustaining injuries. Spencer, the perpetrator of this grim event, became infamous as the original high school shooter. She pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and assault with a deadly weapon, subsequently receiving a 25-year-to-life prison sentence. When questioned about her motive, her response became widely quoted. "I just don't like Mondays." She callously stated in a chilling revelation during negotiations, "It was a lot of fun seeing children shot." The incident and Spencer's unsettling remarks shed light on the profound tragedy and the disturbing mindset behind such acts of violence. Brenda Spencer was tried as an adult and entered a guilty plea to 2 counts of murder and assault with a deadly weapon. Subsequently, she was sentenced to 25 years to life imprisonment. Brenda Spencer's mass shooting at a school initiated discussions about teenage violence and mental health support for troubled youth. Number 9. Dylan Shoemaker. It took a state Supreme Court jury less than 3 hours on Monday to convict Dylan Shoemaker, a 16-year-old from Springville, of intentional murder after he beat a toddler he was supposed to babysit to death. Shoemaker was left to watch Austin Smith, his girlfriend's son, inside the Springville home they shared with Shoemaker's parents. Austin Smith, who was just 4 days shy of his 2nd birthday when he died, became the victim of Shoemaker's admitted loss of temper. While crying, Shoemaker testified that frustration led him to slap, spank, and ultimately slam the child on the floor, punching him multiple times in the head through a pillow. This confession led the jury to sentence Shoemaker to a maximum sentence of up to 25 years to life in prison. The verdict underscores the severity of the crime and the tragic consequences for the young victim. Although the verdict could qualify as a fitting punishment, the motive behind Dylan's actions is bizarre. It should warn parents to be careful of whoever they ask to babysit their kids. Number 8. Antonio Barbeau. Two 13-year-old boys from Wisconsin, Antonio D. Barbeau and Nathan D. Pape, brutally murdered 78-year-old Barbara J. Olson, who happened to be the great-grandmother of Barbeau. The horrific incident occurred on September 24th, when Barbeau and Pape allegedly went to Olson's home armed with a hammer and a hatchet. Prosecutors contend that the boys had the intent to kill the elderly woman. According to a criminal complaint, Barbeau used the blunt end of the hatchet to knock down his great-grandmother, after which the two 8th graders repeatedly attacked her with the hatchet and hammer. Barbeau is said to have delivered the final blow with the hatchet's blade. Following the brutal assault, the boys stole jewelry, loose change, and a purse from Olson's home. Then they stole her car, driving it to get pizza, showing a lack of concern and remorse for the horrific act. The boys left the car and the stolen items unlocked in a bowling alley parking lot, seemingly hoping that someone else would take it, leading to them being charged with Olson's murder. The duo was sentenced to life without possible parole for their crime. They got the devastating consequences of their actions. Number 7. Stuart Harling. In a chilling case that unfolded at the Old Bailey, a 19-year-old trainee accountant, Stuart Harling, was convicted for the murder of nurse Cheryl Moss, 33. During the investigation after the murder, Harling was reported to harbor fantasies involving serial killers and knives. The fateful incident occurred as Moss took a cigarette break outside St. George's Hospital. Out of nowhere, Harling pounced on her for no reason and knifed her 70 times before, during the court proceedings, it was revealed that Stuart Harling had undertaken what seemed to be a rehearsal for his attack. Before the incident, he had ordered a hunting knife and a hand-to-hand combat CD that guided specific areas of the body to target with a knife. Described as a cold-blooded killer during the trial, Harling did admit to the killing, but sought a conviction of manslaughter based on diminished responsibility. Throughout the proceedings, he displayed a concerning lack of regard for the court, insulting the judge, absenting himself from the proceedings, and even throwing papers out of the dock. In a final act of defiance, he refused to come up from the Old Bailey cells to hear the jury's verdict. Stuart Harling spent hours obsessing over crime shows, fantasizing about violent crimes, and even writing a blog about taking a life. Tragically, his sick fantasies became a horrifying reality. Number 6. Eric Smith. At the time, Eric Smith, a 13-year-old, spotted a 4-year-old neighbor playing alone in the park. He tricked the young boy to follow him into the woods and subsequently struck him on the head with a rock before he proceeded to rape him with a branch. Court documents reveal that Eric Smith, characterized as a loner, frequently experienced bullying for his distinct physical features, including protruding low-set ears, thick glasses, red hair, and freckles. The murder case gained national attention primarily because of the young ages of both the perpetrator, age 13, and the victim, who was just 4 years old. Just 2 days following Robbie's funeral, Smith confessed to the killing. In 1994, he was convicted of second-degree murder. He received the maximum sentence then applicable to juvenile murderers, a minimum of 9 years to life in prison. Smith claims that his intense anger towards his classmates drove his actions. Due to his distinctive red hair and thick glasses, he was frequently bullied and chose to vent his frustration by targeting the small child. As of now, Smith is 36 years old and has faced 8 parole denials. Number 5. John Silva. It is always all fun and games before it isn't. 15-year-old John Silva was convicted of first-degree murder for strangling a playmate, 12-year-old Jerry Lee Alley Jr., with elastic bandages and wire, suffocating the victim and then resulted in death. Silva received the mandatory sentence of life in jail without parole. Given his age, he avoided the death penalty, which could have been possible if he were an adult. The plot thickened when Jerry Lee Alley Jr. was reported missing on May 26th, prompting a large-scale search in the Pine Barrens around Interlaken in northeast Florida, where he lived. Unfortunately, his lifeless body was discovered in an abandoned septic tank 3 days later. The discovery of Alley's body, with a chilling note with his name and instructions on how the garbage dump killed him, worsened the details of the unprecedented crime. He showed no emotion during his sentencing, was tried as an adult, and was found guilty of first-degree murder. Number 4. Roxana Sikorski. 15-year-old Roxana Sikorski was charged in court after stabbing her 12-year-old brother. The unsettling events unfolded at Sikorski's family residence around 2 a.m. on October 17, 2014. Sikorski was reported to have conspired with her 23-year-old boyfriend, Michael Rivera, after her family had dissented from their romantic relationship and allegedly hatched a plan to harm her family members and flee together. On the day they chose to execute their plans, Rivera was outside the house sending text messages with instructions and images, guiding his 15-year-old girlfriend's actions inside the home. Sikorski was accused of taking a knife and stabbing her 12-year-old brother in the throat. After the brutal incident, she and her boyfriend fled the scene. Her adoptive mother pleaded for leniency, citing Roxana's troubled upbringing and reactive attachment disorder. Despite her remorse in court, Roxana's actions were driven by psychological issues. It's important to recognize that psychological disorders influence many juvenile crimes. Roxana Sikorski's case is a stark example of how untreated mental health issues can lead to criminal behavior. Number 3. Brian Lee Draper. The effects of what children see on television cannot be undermined, as this case highlights that fact. The popular movie franchise Scream inspired the two 16-year-olds, Brian Draper and Tori Adamczyk, when they orchestrated the murder of their classmate, Cassie Jo Stoddard. On the day of the murder, the duo had spent time with Cassie and her boyfriend, Matt Beckham, watching television before leaving. But unknown to Cassie and Matt, they had unlocked the basement door during their initial visit, intending to return later without detection. Once Matt left with his mother that night, Adamczyk and Draper re-entered the house and carried out the fatal attack in the living room. Her aunt and uncle discovered Cassie's lifeless body 2 days later. A videotape made by the perpetrators revealed the deliberate planning of Cassie's murder, which was enough evidence alongside Matt's testimony of what happened that night. The police also discovered additional incriminating evidence, including clothing, masks, and weapons used in the crime. Adamczyk and Draper were found guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. They received mandatory life sentences without the possibility of parole and an extra 30 years to life for the conspiracy to commit murder charge. The case is a chilling example of the depths of violence and betrayal during this tragic event. Number 2. Joshua Phillips. At just 8 years old, Maddie disappeared from her Jacksonville, FLA neighborhood in November 1998, triggering a massive search effort involving thousands of people. The shocking discovery came a week later when Steve and Sheila Clifton learned that Maddie's body had been hidden across the street, stuffed under 14-year-old Josh's waterbed. The horrifying truth unfolded as Josh confessed to police that, during play, he accidentally struck Maddie with a baseball. Fearing repercussions, he claimed he resorted to using a baseball bat and stabbing her to silence her screams. Despite Josh having no history of violence, he was charged as an adult with first-degree murder and subsequently found guilty. During the early 90s, many states, including Florida, modified their laws, facilitating the trial of juveniles as adults and shifting the focus from rehabilitation to punishment. In this legal climate in 1999, Josh received a life sentence without parole. Number 1. Nicholas Cruz. On February 14, 2018, a devastating incident unfolded at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, resulting in the loss of 17 lives and injuries to 17 others. The assailant, Nicholas Cruz, a 19-year-old expelled former student, pleaded guilty to 17 counts of murder and attempted murder in October of the same year. Cruz arrived at the school armed with a rifle, ammunition cartridges, and smoke grenades. Then he activated a fire alarm, which led students to pour into the corridors, believing it was a routine practice until they heard gunshots. Nicholas fired at students and teachers, claiming lives within and outside the school building. Witnesses recounted the scenes of students seeking refuge wherever possible as chaos unfolded across the 30 classrooms. Upon the arrival of the police, Nicholas dropped his weapon on the 3rd floor. He blended in with the evacuees, which allowed him to leave the building unnoticed. He then made his way to a nearby Walmart. He purchased a drink at a Subway store and later sat down at a McDonald's. Approximately an hour after the attack, Cruz was apprehended by police in Coral Springs, a few miles from the school. After a brief hospitalization, he was released into police custody. The legal consequences for Cruz were severe. He received 34 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, each representing a victim affected by his atrocious actions.